On the evening of August 21st, 1986, the villagers living in the remote Nyos Valley of northwest Cameroon went to sleep exactly as they had for generations. The early night was typical for the wet season, complete with heavy thunderstorms and cooling air. But around 9:30 p.m., the rain was cut by a deep, low rumbling. Then an invisible, silent wave crawled down the hillsides at over 60 kilometers an hour, hugging the ground and filling the valleys. When the sun rose the next morning, the scale of the devastation was absolute. Across the valley, over 1,700 people and 3,000 cattle lay dead. Bodies were scattered everywhere. Entire herds of livestock were found in the fields, showing no signs of external injury despite the mass casualty event. Yet there were no signs of a struggle. Not a single building was damaged, no structures were crushed, and no blood had been spilled. The victims had simply collapsed where they stood. Investigators were left with a sequence of events that defied traditional forensics. A massacre had occurred across miles of terrain, yet the crime scene lacked a physical weapon or any sign of a struggle. The handful of survivors who woke up hours later were weak and severely disoriented. Many reported smelling strong odors resembling rotten eggs or gunpowder right before they lost consciousness. Those distinct sulfur-like smells gave early investigators a working theory. They suspected a toxic chemical release triggered by a standard volcanic eruption. Geologists and foreign researchers flew into the remote valley to examine the surrounding landscape for cracks, vents, and seismic data. But when they reached the epicenter, they found a glaring anomaly. The normally crystal blue water of Lake Nyos had transformed into a deep, rusty red. The shoreline showed signs of sudden, violent disruption. A wave at least 25 meters high had swept across the banks, flattening mature trees. The lake level itself had dropped by a full meter. This presented a massive contradiction. Despite the wave and the reports of gunpowder smells, there was no lava, no ash, and no residual heat. The absence of typical volcanic output meant the lake hadn't erupted in a traditional sense. Scientists were forced to look deeper into the water's chemistry to find the culprit. The reports of sulfur and gunpowder were misleading. At high, near-lethal concentrations, carbon dioxide can trigger sensory hallucinations, leading survivors to believe they smelled volcanic gases when the substance was actually odorless. The true source of that gas lay about 80 kilometers below the lake surface. A pocket of magma sits beneath the crust, continuously leaking pure carbon dioxide upward. This structure is typical of a stratified lake. Unlike most bodies of water that mix seasonally, the cold, heavy water at the bottom of Nyos is kept separated and under immense physical pressure. This mimics an unopened bottle of carbonated water. Over decades, that bottom layer became supersaturated, holding over 1 million tons of dissolved carbon dioxide in a delicate balance. The stratification also explained the changing color. When iron-rich water from the bottom was pulled to the surface, it oxidized the moment it hit the air, turning the lake a rusty red. The basin had effectively become a deep storage reservoir for gas. This volume was held in place only by the weight and temperature of the water above it, waiting for a trigger. While the exact trigger remains debated, most geologists conclude that a minor tremor or a small landslide disturbed the lakebed. This shifted the gas-heavy deep water toward the surface. That upward movement caused a sudden drop in pressure. The dissolved carbon dioxide broke out of the solution, converting from a liquid state into billions of rapidly expanding gas bubbles. This generated a chain reaction as rising bubbles pulled more deep water with them. In seconds, the lake belched nearly 300,000 tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is 1.5 times heavier than air, so it did not dissipate into the sky. Instead, it formed a concentrated, oxygen-deficient layer roughly 50 meters thick that hugged the earth. This heavy, invisible mass plunged down the steep mountainsides. It flowed through ravines and gorges like a river, reaching speeds of 60 kilometers an hour. As it flooded the villages below, the gas displaced all the breathable air. Anyone caught in its path lost consciousness within minutes, suffocating as the oxygen was forced out of the valley. The topography created a direct path from the high-altitude lake to the low-lying villages of Nyos, Cha, and Subum. The gas followed the path of least resistance, pouring into homes without encountering any physical obstacle. Its density allowed it to settle in the valley floor, removing the oxygen required for survival. The Nyos disaster forced a shift in geological monitoring. Researchers now survey seemingly dormant lakes for accumulating gas, looking for the same saturation levels that preceded the 1986 event. Today, the lake is quiet. Surrounded by lush hills, its appearance gives no hint of the million tons of gas once stored at its bottom. To prevent the gas from reaching critical levels again, scientists installed specialized degassing pipes. These act as slow-release valves, continuously drawing up bottom water and venting the carbon dioxide safely. However, a new complication has emerged. The natural geological dam holding back the lake's waters is structurally weakening over time. A dam collapse would cause massive flooding into neighboring Nigeria. Furthermore, the violent loss of water pressure could disturb the deep layers enough to trigger another mass release of gas. The disaster demonstrated that a landscape does not need to show heat or fire to be lethal. In the right geological conditions, a tranquil lake can store and release enough concentrated gas to empty a valley in a single night.
Like, share, and comment. Subscribe.